We'll get started here. This is Dave Maddock with Maddock and Associates here with Gary Forman from Long-Term Care Associates, as well as Carol Galbault. And what we've done is put together a presentation to go through the Washington State new mandatory long-term care insurance program. So really appreciate everyone that's taking the time to log on and join this meeting. Just a reminder, we will be recording this, and I'll be emailing out to everybody a recording of this. So in case anyone joins late or you want someone else to see this, we'd be happy to share that with you right after this meeting. So this presentation is brought to you by Maddock and Associates. We're independent brokers, been in business for over 50 years, and we focus on the employee benefits. So most of the people on this call are clients, and then we also have some potential clients and friends of clients. But we're here to focus. We focus on employee benefits, helping our clients get the most out of the medical, dental, vision insurance, get the best pricing, educate employees on how to effectively use the plan. And a big part of what we do is stay ahead of the latest trends on employee benefits to keep you up to speed with all the compliance rules and regulations. And that's what a big part about this meeting is about, is a new tax benefit that's going to be kicking in January 1st. For more information, if you're not familiar with Maddock and Associates, we're at maddockinsurance.com. So who I've got here to as our guest presenter here is Gary Forman. He is one of the premier experts on long-term care insurance, Senior Vice President of Long-Term Care Associates. Been in business and with 29 years of experience. And the reason we partnered with Long-Term Care Associates is they are independent brokers like Maddock and Associates. So they're able to work with all the different insurance companies in that zone in the long-term care field and able to help all our clients kind of based on their particular needs, find policies that will work for them. So what I'm going to do is turn this over to Gary. He's been following this law as it's been progressing through the legislative branch in Washington State and become law, and is going to be able to really just help us understand how this works for everybody. So I'm going to turn it over to Gary here.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join us. As Dave said, I'm Gary Forman, Senior Vice President at Long-Term Care Associates. Thanks for taking a brief slice out of your afternoon to learn a little bit more about this new program. I'm going to jump in and get my screen shared so that you guys can see the presentation that Dave is talking about. And everybody nod your head, Dave and Carol, if you can see it. Look right? Good. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in. It's about a 15-minute presentation. There's only maybe 8 slides or so we're going to go through. And then I think we'll be able to field some of the questions you might have through the chat feature. Dave will field those and bring those back through. I'm sure there will be a number of questions as this is essentially a new program. So before I get going, just have a quick disclaimer. The information that we're presenting here represents our current understanding of the program. There is legislation pending that may impact material aspects of the program. We expect the rulemaking process to extend potentially beyond the implementation date of January 1, 2022, because of how new this is and how they continue to discover different aspects of the program that require clarification. It could even redetermine the rate of the tax itself. While not in my notes, literally just this morning, the rulemaking committee fielded comments from the public for about an hour. And there are some key things in there that they are still going to need to determine. They've set a date of the 13th of April to come to a decision on a number of things, but it's very possible that date could move. Additionally, there was another 4 amendments placed into motion in the legislature today, one of which may have some legs, and 3 of which I think are going to be fairly short-lived. And we'll talk about what that might be here in just a moment. So let's go ahead and jump right in and talk about the Trust Act. So the Washington State Long-Term Services and Supports Trust Act, it's commonly referred to simply as just the Trust Act. It became law in July of 2019. It is the first of its kind program, and it's basically designed to pay registered caregivers who provide certain types of care to Washington residents who have vested in the program or become qualified beneficiaries. So let's dive in a little bit into what that means. So here's how the benefits of the program work. The benefit consists of 365 $100 units for a total benefit of $36,500. The benefits can be stacked and paid together. So it's not actually a daily benefit, but rather a total lifetime benefit. So once the benefit has been paid out, whether as a lump sum or over the course of several years, there really are no additional benefits beyond those 365 units. Each year, a trust council will vote and decide whether or not to increase the benefit, and increases will be capped at the Washington Consumer Price Index. So the Washington CPI is the top of the increase, but it doesn't necessarily mean they have to do any increase at all from year to year. So you're not eligible for the benefits until you've vested. And this is a key provision. So to vest, you have to pay premiums for at least 10 years without a break of 5 consecutive years or more, or have paid premiums for 3 of the last 6 years. You also must have worked at least 500 hours per year, about 10 hours per week during each of those premium paying years. So if you work less than 500 hours per year, you're not exempt from the tax, but you may also never vest for the Trust Act benefits. On the other hand, if you work full-time but retire before reaching the 10th year of premium payments, you will also not permanently vest in the program. You might experience a temporary period where you can say, I have paid for 3 of the last 6 years and be able to claim benefits during that time. But once you're beyond being able to say you have paid for 3 of the last 6 years, if you had not paid in for 10 years, you will also not be vested in the program. To qualify for benefits, you need assistance with 3 of 10 activities of daily living. So those are medication management, personal hygiene, eating, toileting, transferring, body care, bathing, ambulation and mobility, dressing, and cognitive impairment. So you would need 3 to be deficient in 3 of those 10 items in order to claim your benefits. That's really the basic benefit side of the equation. So how do they fund it? So funding is by way of a new payroll tax of 0.58%, just over 0.5% on all wages and remuneration. The state will begin quarterly tax collection on wages earned beginning January 1, 2022. There's no cap on the amount of wages that will be taxed. There's no end date for the tax collection. If you're working and earning, you're paying the tax. So who is taxed mandatorily? That would be all W-2 employees. All W-2 employees are required to participate in the program. Self-employed and independent contractors are not automatically a part of the program, but can opt in. So these are the basic elements of the benefits and the funding of the Trust Act. But I want to dig a little deeper into some of the things that I know you're probably most interested in. So first of all, what about the opt-out? Can I do that? You can, but the window to do so is actually very limited. Only those individuals who own or purchase private long-term care insurance by approximately July 24th, 2021 can apply for a lifetime exemption. One of the amendments today that was presented is trying to extend that to 12/31/21 to purchase by, but we think that is probably dead on arrival in the Senate. The Employment Security Department will be accepting exemption requests, so you have to go to ESD to request your exemption, and they will only be accepting those between October 1, 2021 and December 31, 2022. So from October of this year through December of next year. Once your exemption has been approved, you're responsible for notifying your employer, and the sooner the better, because any premiums that are withheld before the employer is notified are not recoverable. It's also important to note that once you opt out, you cannot opt back in. It is a permanent state once you do that. So what if you're not a W-2 employee? Can you opt in? Well, you can, but you'll need to do so by December 31, 2025, or within 3 years of becoming self-employed. Now, once you've opted in, you cannot exit the program or opt out. However, you can be canceled from the program for failure to pay your premium, which does seem somewhat like opting out of the program. You would also be responsible for remitting your own premiums based upon your wages and the ESD established procedure at that time. ESD has not established a procedure yet. Will the tax rates increase? There's no guarantee that the rates will remain fixed. The law states that the rate will be set at 0.58% of all wages and remuneration, but that number can change. In fact, the state currently believes that 0.58% may be insufficient to fully fund the program for all 75 years in the model. You may recall that on the ballot last November was a measure called ESJR 8212. It would have allowed the LTC Trust Act funds to be invested in more risky but higher returning securities. Now, supporters of that measure actually maintain that its passage was necessary to maintain the 0.58% rate. It failed at the ballot last year. It's been made public that they intend to introduce or reintroduce a similar measure, ESJR 8200. However, they have not taken action on that to advance that measure in this year's legislative session. Will benefits increase over time? The daily benefit amount has to be adjusted annually at a rate no greater than the Washington CPI, as we said. This means it could be actually adjusted up or down, with the cap or the top end being the Washington CPI. That's going to be determined each year by an 8-person council who will vote on whether or not to do that. Just some of the nuts and bolts around opting in, opting out, and the general benefits. But what kind of services are actually covered if you did claim and against your Trust Act benefits? So facilities that you would generally associate with extended care, like nursing homes or assisted living or adult family homes, those will be covered. Additionally, professional caregiving in the home modifications, those will also qualify. It's important to note, though, that home care must be provided by caregivers that are registered with DSHS. So you're not allowed to select non-registered caregivers. That said, in some cases, family members will qualify once they've received the proper training. So a lot of folks have asked us, isn't the Trust Act really just long-term care insurance? Well, in a word, no. Long-term care insurance is a well-established, statutorily defined type of insurance. It's heavily regulated by the Department of Insurance. The policies are binding contracts between the policyholder and the insurer, and it conveys certain legally required benefits, consumer protections, and tax advantages. These are not things that are offered by the Trust Act. Trust Act is not regulated as insurance, and it actually fails to meet the minimum definitions to be considered long-term care insurance. So it's just important to note it is not a substitute for long-term care insurance. It's a bit of a different beast. One of the most important questions folks have asked us is where they can use their benefits. Only Washington residents can qualify for benefits. Benefits are not portable outside of the state. So imagine if you had benefits or even had vested with your benefits but retired elsewhere, you would not be able to claim those benefits not being a resident of Washington state. So a key thing to take note of. So really the question is it a good deal or not? Well, first, it's important to note, unemployed, non-working spouses and part-time workers likely will not benefit from this program, as they will never pay in. If they do pay in, they may never vest. However, for many Washington workers, this may be their only option and the only protection they get against some of their future costs for long-term services and supports. The Trust Act may provide those individuals with a critical lifeline. Also, for those that earn a lower wage, it's possible it may provide a good value relative to the tax that you have to pay in. Remember, the benefits don't change based upon what you pay in. It's a flat benefit for everybody. That said, the state's own outside actuarial firm has noted that 45% of the state's residents, representing 75% of the wages, can actually find comparable coverage on the private market. So when we look at this, the real question is private market or Trust Act. How do they compare? Is one better than the other? What's right for me? Well, let's take a look at some of the key differences between private insurance and the Trust Act. Now, Of course, we've already mentioned there's many differences in how they're structured and regulated, but here are some of the basic differences that we see, not getting down into the benefits themselves, but really just how they're built on a general basis. So most importantly, right, private insurance is portable. When you move, it moves with you. For example, if you're retired in a different state, you would not be able to qualify. Or if you reside in, let's say, Idaho or Oregon and commute to work in Washington, you may be taxed based upon the localization of your work, but unable to claim benefits because you're not a resident in Washington. We hope that gets fixed somehow in the rules process. Benefits from a tax-qualified long-term care insurance policy are received tax-free. The premiums may be deductible if you meet certain thresholds or pay through your business. It's unclear right now if Trust Act benefits are taxable. It is yet to be determined. Private policies are certainly available to non-working partners, retirees. They're regulated by the insurance commissioner, and may actually protect your assets from Medicaid. Some types of private insurance actually even have features designed to return your premium upon death or policy surrender. Unlike the Trust Act, private rates are based upon your age, health, gender, and your benefits. They are not based upon your wages. High earners do not pay more for private long-term care insurance. It's based on other factors other than your wages. So for many Washington workers that face the health challenges, like I said, the Trust Act may be both their best and their only option to provide a critical benefit. Serving those Washington workers and residents that work with health impairments, that's the value of guaranteed acceptance. And so we do recognize that. So looking beyond just the general structure of the plan, how might a private policy compare to the tax? So in our example, what we've done here is we've calculated the tax against wages at increasing increments of $50,000. So when we set those taxes opposite of an average rate for a small plan that would qualify for the Trust Act exemption, the numbers tend to jump off the page. So now, to be fair, this is an average rate. So your rate that you experience may be higher or lower based upon a broad range of criteria, specifically your age, your health, and what benefits you select. But it's also easy to see that as the wages go up and the associated tax goes up, that the level premiums for private long-term care insurance become very compelling. It's also important to note, though, that you do need to health qualify for private coverage. And the policies in this example are only in effect as long as you continue to pay premiums, just like your health insurance or your car insurance. So you do need to renew these annually. There's no vesting with this program, although there are options that do allow you to purchase a paid-up private long-term care insurance policy. These are just a few of the ways that we've sort of looked at this from an economics perspective. And I have just a couple more questions before we jump back in, or a couple more items to cover, questions to answer, and then one more item to cover before we jump back into your questions. What type of LTC insurance policy would qualify for the exemption? So the Trust Act is currently, and this, by the way, was a big topic of the rules meeting this morning, is individuals seeking more clarity on what will qualify and what does the purchase by date mean, all those things specifically. So the Trust Act is currently aligning itself with the statutory definition for long-term care insurance, which would include traditional long-term care insurance, and those life insurance policies with what's called a 7702B rider. So that's a federal tax code that applies to tax-qualified long-term care insurance. We believe it would not include policies at this point that include a 101G rider. This is another tax code. These riders are typically called chronic illness riders. You can spot them in your policy because they can't use the term long-term care insurance. And they're frequently included in life policies at no additional charge. So those are some of the things to look for if you're looking at an existing policy that you have. There may be some circumstances where a policy is living in both worlds and it has both types of riders. It's unclear how those will be treated at this point. So is there a minimum policy benefit level to qualify for coverage? Well, at this point, you just need to own, they haven't mentioned anything about any minimum coverage for qualification. You just need to own a long-term care insurance policy by July 24th, 2021. That said, you can own both of them. You can have a private policy and participate in the Trust Act. There's nothing that's precluding people from doing that. Just remember, once the window to claim the exemption has passed, which is December 31 of 2022, there's no opting out of the Trust Act program. So in the end, what's the best option for you? Well, look, the Trust Act is there for all Washingtonians that both work and live in the state. If you have health challenges, if you feel like you can't afford a private alternative, it may be your best and only choice. For many others, you may do better in the private market. The most important thing you can do is find a licensed insurance agent that understands long-term care insurance and can walk you through your choices. Fortunately, we've got a great one for you. Now, admittedly, for some of you, this will be a tax elimination question. That's fine too. There are great private alternative insurance solutions that'll meet those needs as well. But the time to act is actually limited. So I want to just review the key dates that you need to keep in mind when you're looking at this issue. So July 24, 2021, this is going to be the deadline at this point, unless they change it, to have purchased private long-term care insurance. They've not defined the word purchased yet. Some policies can sometimes take weeks or even months to issue. So the sooner you act, the better. It's also entirely possible they just mean the effective date of the policy, which can be the day you sign the application. Again, it's unclear. So to be safe, we're encouraging everybody to act sooner rather than later. October 1, 2021. That's the first opportunity to apply for the exemption with DSHS. That process has yet to be determined, but that is the earliest date to act. January 1, 2022, two things are happening. It's when the self-employed can begin to opt into the program. It's also when wages begin being counted toward the tax. And then December 31, 2022 is the last day to apply for that exemption if you own a private long-term care insurance policy that you purchased by July 24th of this year. If you've waited this long, you've probably paid taxes into the program that you won't be able to recover at that point. And then lastly, January 1, 2025 is the first day that you can apply for benefits. That's 3 years after the program begins. So let me wrap up with what might be considered the next steps for many of you, and then we'll go ahead and field your questions. So here are your next steps. You've seen Carol Gilbo on the screen as well. Carol is, we're going to ask you to reach out to Carol. Carol's a 20-year veteran in the long-term care insurance space. She's a seasoned pro. She can help you quickly find the best option to meet your needs. She's got a ton of great testimonials on our website, and you can download her bio there as well. I can assure you Carol is all business, smart, and can get you right to where you need to go in a hurry. So what I would encourage you to do is grab a pen. I'm sure Dave will share this information as well, but jot down her email and her phone number. That's a landline, so please don't text. And as you can imagine, this is rapidly becoming a very big job. And I know there's a ton of you on this webinar alone. So if you all decide to reach out the minute the webinar is over, I can assure you it's going to take a while to get back to everybody. So we appreciate your patience in advance, but it might be better to start with email rather than phone tag. And make sure you identify yourself as a Maddock client so that we know who we're working with. Now, I want to cover two other things really quickly. Remember, we said you need to health qualify for this coverage. So I want to make sure everybody understands the type of information that we'll be looking for and asking. Right out of the gate, you're going to see that height and weight is very important. It's actually the #1 reason people get declined for coverage. So we want to make sure we understand that. Any chronic conditions, diabetes, heart disease, autoimmune conditions, any daily medication that you take that's prescription medication, what you're taking it for, also important to know. And any medical appliances. I know a lot of people sort of forget about those things because they use them every day, so they don't think of them in terms of a medical appliance. They think of it just as part of their daily life, like a CPAP machine, for example. And the other thing that can really impact what option is best for you is some detailed personal information. For example, if you're a single, domestic partner, married, those rates will differ individually based upon your marital status. I'm not sure if any folks here are from other countries. You do need a green card or be a U.S. resident to apply for coverage. We'll want to know something about your wages because we do want to build a wage appropriate solution for you. And for those of you that are part of a group, not offering this through the company, but several people together that are part of a common employer, there is the opportunity to share with those folks a 5% discount with one of our insurance companies. It's not across the board with all companies, but we do have some options that we can work through with you to try to get you the best deal just to suit your needs specifically. So that said, I'm going to wrap things up on my end and see, Dave, if anybody has had any questions that have cropped in that we can address.
Yeah, thanks so much, Gary, for this. That was very informative. Yeah, I do have some questions, and one of them came up. I think you answered it, but it says there's a company that actually has a group long-term care plan, and they're wondering if future employees that they hire in the future would qualify for the exemption if they are eligible for that long-term care plan.
Yeah, sadly, likely not. So they can still probably participate in the group long-term care plan if the group is still accepting people. But if you do not own a policy before that cutoff date, it's not going to count. Now, let's say, what if you pass the cutoff date, but somebody buys a policy you have to buy the policy by July 24th. You have to apply for the exemption between October 1 of 21 and December 31 of 22. If somebody comes to work for you and has a policy after the application for exemption is over, they're also going to be stuck in the program. I mean, everything has to work on those dates. You have to own the policy by July, apply for the exemption October to December. Otherwise, you're in the program. So even if you bought the group policy in July of next year, although you could technically apply for the exemption, you will not have purchased it by the deadline required.
Great. And then one thing I wanted to add, we have looked at, groups doing long-term care policies with respect to this law, and they came to be quite a few like compliance and technical risks that we saw with that. Considering that this is a lifelong opt-out, as an employer, it could be somewhat dangerous or risky to promote a plan for your employees that would opt them out of a state-run benefit for their entire life. So that's what we've decided to team up with LTC Associates, so that they can help each individual employee determine what's best for them. And if somebody does decide to opt out of this program for their entire life, it wouldn't be if they change their mind down the road, or if they missed a premium or something happened, it wouldn't come back on the employer as something that you did wrong. So that's why we're much in favor of kind of the individual approach to this benefit, mainly because it's a lifelong opt-out. With that said, if there's a plan that's popular, Carol can work, if there's 5 people in the group, get the 5% discount. And so that came up with another question kind of in the same ballpark, was should employees reach out individually to Carol, or if there's an HR manager or employer that knows there's quite a few employees interested, should they reach out on behalf of those employees?
Yeah, I would say, and Carol, you can chime in if you want, but our understanding is there's no, I'm going to ask you a question in just a second. There's no ability to run a census quote.
Right.
So everybody should reach out individually. And I would say this, just to note, we really don't have any solutions for individuals under the age of 30.
Mm-hmm.
The limitation of the products that are available. If an individual is under 30, we'll share with them an outside company that we think might accept them, but we're not able to distribute that product that would go under the age of 30. Also, going back to the numbers, if you're not making more than about 50,000, it also may not be a very compelling option for you from an economics perspective. You might look at it and say, I got a better shot at paying less money and investing for 10 years with the state plan. That's also something to look at. So there's sort of minimum age requirements and minimum income requirements. Carol, you want to add anything to that?
No, I just don't want anybody to feel like they're not able to call me. Anybody can call me, and I'd be happy to even speak with them to see if they then want to pass my name along to people individually, but it really is an individual conversation.
Thank you.
All right. So there's quite a few questions regarding the procedures of the opt-out. Is there a form? Who do we apply for the opt-out? Is it Department DSHS or ESD? I know that a lot of those rules have not been issued, or the details aren't there. So maybe Gary, if you could kind of just, to the best of your ability, talk about the opt-out procedure, what you know, what you don't know.
Okay, so here's what we know so far. I'd like those answers too, by the way, but here's what we know so far. ESD is managing the opt-out part of the program. When you apply with ESD, if approved, you will receive a letter notifying you that you are exempt. And that letter is what you show to employers to empower them to not have to withhold taxes. And it's your obligation to show that to your current employer and any future employers. Now, beyond that, there are probably 100 different smaller questions, but we don't really have the answers to those yet because ESD hasn't put out their policies or procedures. Now, for any of you that have had prior experience, for example, with paid family medical leave, you might recall that they introduced that on January 1st and didn't actually have the forms ready to submit until June of that year, and then went retroactively back to January. It's very possible they may not have all their ducks in a row, but that doesn't mean that the dates will change. So the process is, got to go to ESD. The soonest you can go is October 1 of 2021. ESD is going to get you a letter. Beyond that, we don't know what the employer is going to be required to do on the actual processing form to prove that they've gotten all the correct requirements. So unknown to that level of detail.
Thank you. Another question came up, and this might be good just because I think a lot of people might not fully understand how long-term care works. So it says, so when you do retire, does the Trust Act still pay out if needed, as a retiree wouldn't be paying into the plan anymore? Or is it only effective while you're paying in? So this might have to do with the vesting.
Yes.
And the idea of long-term care. It is meant to work when you do retire. So maybe just elaborate on that.
It's specifically related. That's a question specifically related to the vesting. You have to have paid in for 10 years, worked 500 hours a year during each of the 10 years that you pay in without a break of more than 5 years. If you did that and then retired, you would be vested in the program, and you could claim that $36,500 benefit until the day that you die, provided that you satisfied the triggers of not being able to do 3 of the 10 activities of daily living. By contrast,
are in the state of Washington.
Yeah, and live in the state of Washington, right? Not retire somewhere else. Let me just back up real quick. It's important to note here that when we look at the bottom there where it says 3 of 10 activities of daily living, long-term care insurance policies in Washington are required to only require 2 of 6 activities of daily living, not 3 of 10. Here's the big difference. In Washington state, it's for private insurance, is 2 of 6 activities of daily living or cognitive impairment. So a cognitive impairment on its own is a benefit trigger for private coverage, or 2 of 6 activities of daily living. The state plan is 3 of 10 activities of daily living, of which cognitive impairment is 1. So just having a cognitive impairment will not qualify you for the Trust Act. You would need to add 2 more of those triggers to be able to claim the benefit.
Great. Questions about other employees in other states. I think I could probably answer that one. This is a tax just on Washington state employees, correct?
Yeah. So it comes down to localization. Where's that work performed? And so it is those individuals that are working in Washington. A great rule of thumb might be if they're paying into the paid family medical leave, that's probably going to be the same person that's paying into the Trust Act. Mm-hmm. Live in Washington, work in Oregon. The work is localized in Oregon. You're probably not paying Washington taxes on that. live in Oregon and work in Washington, you're probably paying taxes. So that's how it would sort of impact companies who have employees in multiple states. It's not where the company is located, it's where the work is done. That's our understanding at this point of localization rules.
All right. And then there's quite a few questions about, well, why has the state not told us about this? Who's responsible for notifying employees or people of the ability to opt out? Kind of, more about like, why didn't I already know about this? Why is the opt out, so soon, and who's supposed to notify, or why haven't I been notified?
Yeah, I like Carol's answer. Just put your arms in the air. I can't really tell you exactly why they have elected not to notify any employers. I can tell you that the promotional budget for this program kicks in January 1 of 2024, remarkably 2 years after the program is implemented, and about a year before people can claim benefits. This has been done, although everything has been public, it has not been publicized very well. There is no, I would not have any expectation that Employment Security is going to notify anybody specifically about the opt-out if it remains to be July 24th of 2021. Perhaps they will. They're not obligated to. Their motivation with this program is to have as many people in the program and participating as possible. It is designed to be funded to a large extent by the highest wage earners in the state, because again, those benefits don't change with the wages or with the tax that you pay in. It's a level tax, so they want as many people as possible in the program.
All right. And then someone asked, how do we suggest we share this with employees? Feel free to forward this email that I'll be sending out with the recording of this presentation, along with the other information that we've sent out. You can forward that to employees to help educate them about this. And then there have been some questions about, if you have private insurance and the state plan, how does that work together? Coordination of benefits. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, they have not indicated that there's any coordination of benefits at this point between the state or private coverage. So the state would not necessarily withhold payment if the private coverage was paying, or vice versa. They're utilizing a totally different structure, a totally different benefit trigger or qualification requirement, as you see at the bottom of the screen there, as I just explained. So there is no coordination of benefits. They have talked about developing specific plans that would augment or work together with the Trust Act, but we don't foresee that as a viable option because of the current regulations surrounding coverage. They just don't work together.
All right. And then there's some questions about once I've paid in for 10 years, can I stop paying, or do I pay my whole life?
If you're working and earning, you're paying.
Yeah.
Okay. And then someone was getting at a 12-year-old is wondering if they can do anything to opt them out now. They don't even have a job, but that's kind of, they're out of it, right? You kind of have to be working now and probably have a job, I guess, to opt out.
Well, no. So it's funny. We talked about this before. So you had to be 19 or older. And so you would need to own coverage and apply for the opt out. You'd get your approval letter, but without an employer, you may just not have anybody to give it to at this moment. But you would hold that. You would probably laminate it, put it in a safe, and put that safe in a safe, and then take it out when you need it to report to your employer. But for those individuals that are 18 or younger, they are going to face a lifetime of this program if it continues on this current path.
Yeah, and I guess part of the reason we're coming to you now with this information is there's been a lot of developments recently in the latest legislative session. As you can tell right now, we don't have all the answers. We have a lot more than we did. So it's kind of a timing as far as when we don't want to come out and share information and not barely know anything. So, but we couldn't really push it off any further. Gary, do you want to talk a little bit more about timing as far as anything else?
Well, no, I mean, I think Dave makes a good point, which is there's a balancing act between promoting this and having no answers and waiting until all the answers are determined. And right now, this rules committee, this legislation it may not wrap up until the end of the month. And we feel like it's a pretty strong indication that, that the July 24th date will stay. You cannot purchase your policy too early. You can only purchase it too late, right? So once you miss that opportunity, it will have passed by. Now, in all fairness, they are still proposing and trying to extend that date. And that was one of the amendments that was presented today. But I can tell you that same date was presented 2 weeks ago and failed to pass the committee. So I don't know why it would pass now. But from a timing perspective, you really just, if this is something you're interested in, I would probably start the process now just to see from a health perspective if you can qualify. And if so, try to drill down a plan. And if they change, you know, if the whole program evaporates from a lawsuit or something in the next 3 months, well, then I guess you would bail out of it, you know, if you didn't find a need for it from a planning perspective.
Gary, I answered a couple questions in here. So just to speed up with respect to everybody's time, that were just private ones that had nothing to do with us really needing to.
Okay.
Time.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, we lost Dave.
Oh, hey, can you hear me?
How do they work for the state? If we buy privately, how does that work? I think we have.
Oh, hey. Okay.
Sorry about that. Am I back on?
Yeah, you're back on.
Okay. So we have a couple of people that think along my lines, maybe trying to game the system or something. They're saying, hey, if I sign up for the policy, opt out, do I have to keep paying for it or you know?
Yeah, unknown. So
Don't know.
Unknown. It was part of the rules making question, the public comment today. Part of that was how will you validate this in future years after somebody gets their letter? It's always possible that they may put that obligation on the employer as a record retention request. In other words, you get your opt-out letter approved, but the employer has to keep an active proof of coverage on file. But who knows? That rule has not yet been determined.
Okay.
Unknown.
So I think we should probably wrap this up. Just one more question that we're thinking about, I guess, is as far as have you ever, I mean, I'm trying to think myself. I've been doing this for 20 years. Gary, you've got like 10 years on me. Are you familiar with anything else where there's a lifelong opt-out, like in how that's worked? Because I know it seems like government's fluid, you know, and we're operating based on the information we know now, trying to make decisions. Do you have any idea as far as like what the opt-out? Have you ever dealt with anything like this, or is there any other parallels that you could, you know, rely on?
Yeah, I'll give you my this is sort of just the high level overview of that. Private long-term care insurance is guaranteed renewable for life. So the minute a policyholder enters into a contract, those policies cannot be canceled ever, right? So that's the world that we live in. On the legislative side of things, the Trust Act is a legislative process. I've never seen a social program like this that had an opt-out for life. But that said, they can change the rules on this the same way they can change the rules on Medicaid and Medicare simply through legislation. So while we believe we know the construct of the program today, they could come back 5 years from now and say, we've decided that it's not viable in this form. We're going to change the benefits. We're going to change the opt-out rules. We're going to make it voluntary. I mean, they can do whatever they want to do. It's not really a binding contract. It's a legislative process. So to circle back, I've never seen anything like this, where there's a permanent opt-out for a tax or a program that you couldn't somehow get your way back into by maybe, oh, I don't know, paying the back tax or something like that. But yeah, Dave, I've never seen anything like this. Definitely a legislative process, not an insurance process.
All right. Yeah, and then I guess I had some other questions about older employees, and I think I know the answer. I'll let you answer it though. Let's say you're nearing retirement, and you're probably most likely not going to pay in long enough for the benefit of this, and maybe if you have a medical condition, so you're not really able to opt out. Is there anything to do about that?
Yeah, very few options. I get the question. You can't qualify probably for private coverage, and you're not going to vest in the state plan because you won't pay in long enough. and that's probably the worst of all circumstances.
I told that person to call me and I can see if they qualify. And
Yeah.
that I can know.
Yeah, thank you, Carol. I mean, there's probably a brief window, again, if they paid in for 3 years, where they could say, I have paid in for 3 of the last 6 years. But once you get out beyond that window where you can say that, then you would be without anything. But like I said, that's exactly the stuff that Carol can answer for you on an individual basis, because she understands the health qualifications and the details surrounding that.
All right. All right, well, I see there's some more questions. We'll try to make sure that any of them that we didn't address here are answered later. We'll follow up with you. And then, yeah, definitely just keep Carol's information handy. Let them know you're with Maddock and Associates referred you. She'll take care of you, figure out all your personal options, and then, you know, make sure to get you a policy that makes sense for you. Sometimes it could mean opting out of the state plan. Sometimes the state plan might be the best program for you. Other options, you might do a little bit of both. So everyone's a little bit different based on your income, your needs, your concerns. So
Can you put my email back up there? I just by accident answered somebody's question without an answer. My me what my email was, but
yeah, so Carol at ltc-associates.com. And then also Maddock and Associates, we're here for you as well. So really appreciate everybody joining. As I mentioned, we're going to send out the recording. And anything else to add, Carol or Gary?
Thank you all for your time. We really appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
everybody.